All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Stephen Daniels, and I'd like to welcome you to the Talk of Santa Clarita Live. This is the largest audience that has ever been recorded. This is the first podcast that's ever been recorded in front of a live audience, because usually the audience that we have is, me. This is episode 103, featuring the 25th Congressional District primary election debate. Tonight we have Jess Phoenix, Bryan Caforio, and Katie Hill in attendance. I know a lot of you are wondering, will Congressman Knight actually show up? Well, I do have a response from his campaign, and I'd like to read it to you now. Dear Mr. Daniels, in regards to the debate taking place on April 28th, nope. But I honestly, I can't blame him. There are 3 Democrats on the stage, so it would be a 3-on-1 kind of situation. That being said, to the best of my knowledge, he is in the district this weekend, so I have texted him to remind him of the debate. We have an open podium and microphone available to him should he decide to show up. And now you may ask, why are we doing that? Well, we've already paid for the podium. So either way, tonight should be informative and hopefully entertaining. Early voting is about to get underway, and I think the candidates are all getting anxious to be done with the primary. I know I am. And as I'm sure you already know, we do not edit these podcasts. So what happens, happens, and what is said, which of course doesn't make for perfection every time, but it is always an open and honest conversation. And just a reminder to everyone out there, with the exception of tonight's very expensive presentation, the Talk of Santa Clarita does not have sponsors, and no money is ordinarily exchanged for doing these podcasts. In other words, no one ever gets paid for doing this. We are not part of any other media organization and operate completely and totally independently. These podcasts and this debate in particular are simply provided as a public service to the SCV. We hope you're enjoying them. So with that out of the way, let's get talking.
Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita Live. A podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 103, the 25th Congressional District Primary Debate. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
All right, guys, can everybody hear me? Is everything good? All right, let's start off with doing the introductions. First person we want to introduce is Jess Phoenix.
Is this where I get to do my intro statement?
Not yet.
Okay.
You're over eager.
I know.
Bryan Caforio. And finally, Katie Hill. All right, before we actually get things going, we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to bring out Ryan Daniels and Bridget Campbell to do the pledge for us.
Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice job, guys. Can I get a high five? Well done.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but one of those was my kid. So, the monitor's not turned on. There we go. Okay. So here's the way it works tonight. There's going to be a 2-minute opening statement, or question actually, which is the only question that the candidates were given in advance. Everything else, as far as the questions go, were put together by an anonymous committee, put together by me, and questions were put together. About 30 to 40 of them were thrown at me, literally, and then I took them, and not until 4 o'clock this morning did I finally put them together. They were put in a sealed envelope, which I have here.
Wow.
So only I have seen these questions. And just so everybody knows, there's a 2-minute opening statement, and then 90 seconds for each question, 1 minute for rebuttal, and if I choose to, by discretion, 30-second follow-ups. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to let the first question go to Bryan, because Bryan texted me happy birthday. Where were you guys?
When is it?
It was last Sunday.
Happy late birthday.
Okay. So we'll go to Bryan first. The opening question: why did you choose to run for Congress? Now, I don't want a standard answer. I want something anecdotal, a defining moment for you that made you realize the best thing you can do is run for Congress, and why you thought you were the best person for it.
Well, thank you, Stephen, Hillary, everybody for being here. For me, November 8th, 2016 was one of the worst nights in American history. I was horrified that we elected such a despicable person to be our president. And there were a series of events that happened each month thereafter that led me to run. And it really all started at the Women's March in January. Lisa and I went there, and we stood in peaceful solidarity with 800,000 people who came together to show the world we wouldn't be quiet, we wouldn't back down, and we wouldn't let that man be the face of this nation. And then followed that up in February, going to a hearing on the Aliso Canyon gas leak, a local environmental catastrophe. 20,000 of our friends and neighbors had to be relocated. And at this standing room only hearing, Congressman Knight was the only local official who didn't even bother not only to show up, but even to send staff to stand with our community. And then in March, in Stevenson Ranch, I went to the hearing on the Chiquita Canyon dump expansion, and there Congressman Knight did bother to send staff who spoke in favor of expanding the dump in our backyard, putting our children, our health, our environment at risk. So I stood up with our community and spoke against the dump expansion. And then in April, at Congressman Knight's Simi Valley Town Hall, he defended calling a constituent crazy, minimized a young student's sexual harassment, bragged about concealed carry reciprocity, and showed he had no interest in protecting our health care. And that led us right to May. And on May 4th, Congressman Knight voted for Trump Care, putting our entire community at risk. And I knew right then that I couldn't sit on the sidelines, and I launched my campaign because I could not let this man represent our community with this person in the White House. Because when I look back, I want to know that I did everything possible to defend this country, stop this president, and stand with this community. Thank you.
Let's go with Jess. Jess, why did you choose to run for Congress? What was that moment for you?
Election night 2016. I was working the polls in the Valley and growing more and more depressed every time I checked CNN. So on the drive home, I called my husband, Carlos. He was in South Phoenix, Arizona. He had spent the day knocking doors in a last-ditch effort for Hillary. He was going to stay the night in Phoenix, but scrapped that plan and started driving back. On the drive, we talked and we raged. We discussed the fate of our immigrant relatives, what would happen to scientific research, and what it would be like for millions of sexual assault survivors who would have to deal with the trauma of having Donald Trump as president. And we went to sleep that night when he got home at like 4 in the morning, completely exhausted. And when I was sleeping, something took root inside of me. Because the truth is, and I've said it before, I didn't want to run for Congress. I didn't choose to run for Congress. I feel obligated to run for Congress. And this is something that I could have just ignored. I loved what I was doing with the nonprofit that I founded. We were doing great work, and I'd put literal blood, sweat, and tears into what we were doing. But I took what Trump had said about rolling back environmental protections at face value. I measured that against Steve Knight's science denial and the fact that he was taking so much money from fossil fuel behemoths. The solution to this equation is to send a scientist to Congress to take Steve Knight's place on the House Science Committee. That is how we fix things. And for too long, we have been sending professional fundraisers to office. They are skilled at representing whoever bought their ticket to Capitol Hill. But in 2018, the elections are not about money, they are not about polls, and they are not just about Donald Trump. They're about creating the vision of the future that we want for our community. And I know that right here in this building, we have what it takes to do the hard work. I believe in you.
Okay, Katie.
Yeah.
Same question to you. Why did you choose to run for Congress? What was that pivotal moment for you?
Sure. So, as many of you know, I had worked on homelessness, the issue of homelessness, as the executive director of PATH long before I ever thought of running for Congress. I thought that that was where I was going to spend my career. I come from a family of public servants. My dad's a police officer. My mom's a registered nurse. And that's what our family does, is we figure out ways to help people. But I could have kept doing that. I mean, we were literally helping thousands of people move off the streets into permanent homes every single year. So I didn't feel the need to necessarily change the direction until one moment in February of 2017. I mean, of course, I was horrified by the election, but we were focused on the ground, on the difference that we could make in people's lives right now. And but in February of 2017, someone that I really respect, a good friend and a person who worked in county government, who was key in a lot of the work that we'd done around homelessness, Facebook messaged me and said, hey, your district, the 25th district, where they knew that I lived because I made an hour-and-a-half commute every day, and people were always flabbergasted by that, is key in us being able to take back the House. It's a district that Hillary won by 7 points, but the Democrat last time around lost by 6. So she said, you should run. You should think about running. And I laughed at first, and I was like, no. But then that was the morning, and it was right before I took a shower. Then I got in the shower, and we all know how shower thoughts go. So normally I think about things like whether, if ants were human-sized, that they would rule the world. But this time my thoughts were a little bit more serious, and I ended up thinking about, well, why is that? Why was it that Hillary could win this seat by so much, but that the Democrat couldn't take it? And it's a lot of different reasons. One is Steve Knight is a former cop. We have the highest number of law enforcement living in this district out of anywhere in the greater Southern California area. He's comes from a family of military folks. That is something that my family is every single generation has served in the military going back to the Revolutionary War. He's from this community. He's truly from this community. And I have all of those, and I decided this is where I can make a difference. Thank you.
So for the record, that was the only question that they were being given. So now it's open season. And speaking of open season, our first topic is gun control. And I just want to take a quick survey. How many of you actually own guns? Raise your hand. Katie is the only one. Let the record show that. Okay. I think in the past forums and debates that I've seen, and having talked to you both, all of you individually, I think all of you agree that there's a gun problem in this country. However, there are people that are extremely concerned about infringing on the Second Amendment. My question to you is, what do you tell someone that has an AR-15 rifle? And what do you do to convince them to give it up? And in a broader sense, what do you say to those that are not that you're not going to be infringing on the Second Amendment with gun restrictions? We'll start with Jess.
So Port Arthur, Australia, in 1996, over 35 people were killed by a guy with a bunch of guns and who was very, very angry. One of the ways that they actually reduced gun violence significantly in Australia was through gun buyback programs. That is a way that people can get money for their weapon. And when you're talking about instituting gun reform, it's important to notice that, we're not saying take everyone's guns away. That's what a lot of people fear. I have FBI agent parents. They are armed most of the time, even when they come visit me here in hippie California. But I'll tell you, when you tell people, we want to be very specific in the regulations that we are suggesting. And for me, that means knowing about what you are trying to regulate. And that means saying centerfire semi-automatic weapons are what I am looking to ban. not bolt action, not lever action, making sure that we can very definitively restrict things like magazine capacity, institute national background checks, universal background checks, a 14-day waiting period nationwide, but also reminding them that, look, we need the evidence. And that's why now that the CDC is free to research gun violence, that we ensure that they have adequate funding, but we also update and modernize the ATF's gun registry. That is the way that you can tell people that you're not just trying to take people's guns away arbitrarily, but make the system work better for everyone's safety.
All right, before we go to Bryan, Jess, your website says that you support the idea of banning assault weapons. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've refined it since I posted that. So ever since then, I've been very clear about saying centerfire semi-automatic rifles. That's what I'm interested in introducing legislation to ban.
So you have no interest in banning the AR-15?
It is a centerfire semi-automatic rifle.
You know more about guns than me do.
Yeah.
All right, Bryan, the same question to you. What do you tell somebody that has an AR-15 that you're not going to infringe on the Second Amendment?
Look, I tell them I am really darn sick of waking up morning after morning and reading about another massacre. And I'm tired of, I know many people in this room were at the town hall that we just had, that the students at COC put on. I've been so inspired with what happened from Florida and how that's taken over and right here in our community. And watching the main organizers of that, or two of the main organizers, two 14-year-old young women who stood up and gave some of the most poised, articulate, powerful speeches I've ever heard, talking about how they are scared to go to school because they don't feel safe, because people like Steve Knight refuse to take action to save lives. The Supreme Court has been so clear that we can put protections in place that will save lives. There is no reason we can't ban assault weapons, bump stocks. There is no reason that we can't have a 14-day waiting period that at the very least will save 1,000 lives a year by reducing suicides and crimes of passion. There is no reason we can't raise the raise the age from 18 to 21 and get universal background checks. Because if you are a domestic abuser, if you have mental health issues, if you are a suspected terrorist, you should not be able to purchase a weapon in our community. There are so many things that the Constitution, the Supreme Court are all clearly allowed under the Second Amendment. We can do that. We can save lives. We just need people with the will and courage to stand up to the corporate gun lobby.
Bryan, all that's well and good, but what I'm asking you is, what do you tell Matt Funicello, I'm going to call him out here, who believes very profoundly in the Second Amendment? How do you convince him that it's okay to ban assault weapons? He sees that as an infringement on the Second Amendment. What do you say to him?
He's just flat out wrong.
Okay, but
look, Stephen, I went to Yale Law School. I worked for a federal judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I've read the Supreme Court cases, and for hundreds of years, the Supreme Court has said specifically that you can put protections like that in place to save lives. And so there are going to be a few really conservative people on the other side who just don't understand what our Constitution says, but that's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is saving lives,
I understand
and we can do that, and it will be upheld by the Supreme Court.
My question to you, though, is this. Regardless of whether you're right or not, you still got to convince him of that. Now, how are you going to present an argument to him to have him say, I agree, I'm going to put my weapon down for the sake of the country?
Stephen, what I am interested in is passing legislation that withstands constitutional scrutiny, that will save lives. That's what I'm interested in doing. And the rest follows suit after that.
All right. We'll move on to Katie then. Yeah. Katie, same question. What do you tell somebody that's an AR-15?
Well, certainly that's something that I've done before because my own family has people in it that own AR-15s. So that's something that has come up a lot in the course of this election, in the course of what I've been working on for years and years and years. And I actually, as a gun owner, as somebody who, the first time I shot a gun, I was 7 years old. We come from a family of law enforcement. My husband comes from a family of law enforcement. I've never bought a gun, but I own guns because they've been passed down through generations in some cases, and just from my husband's dad. So for me, what you say to somebody who says that this is an infringement on your Second Amendment rights is, I'm not trying to infringe on your Second Amendment rights because these are what I consider something fundamental to how I operate and how I live my life as well. So I haven't shot a gun in, probably 10, 12 years, but knowing that they're there, having them on our farm with 2.5 acres is something that a response time for law enforcement is 15 minutes at least. I prefer to have them, and I think that many people out here do as well. We've got 40% of people in this district that own guns. 40% that either own a gun or have someone in their household owning a gun. That means a lot of you right here own guns. So to me, it's saying, what can we agree on instead? We know, Second Amendment, I personally don't think that we should ever say to somebody, you're wrong, or you don't understand, if we're trying to convince them. But saying, what can we agree on? We're gun owners. We believe in safety. We don't want these weapons to get in the hands of people that shouldn't. We need universal background checks. It depends on the person, but
I'm going to call you on time.
The vast majority agree on the same thing if you can get past that moment of you're wrong and you don't understand.
Now, let me do one follow-up. So I did follow up with Bryan. Katie, I did notice that you received the endorsement of Moms Demand Action.
Yes, it's the Moms Demand Action. It's the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense Candidate Distinction.
Okay, thank you. You are also known to own guns, as you said. What makes you a better advocate for the cause than, say, Bryan or Jess?
Because I can say that. I can relate to somebody on the level of saying, we recognize the same things. This is part of the fabric of America, whether we like it or not. And you're never going to be able to be successful in passing reform that is actually effective and actually matters to save lives if you can't get the other side on your same team. So that's something that I believe is truly at the deepest part of my being.
Okay. Our next topic is dark money. The issue of dark money has come up in this campaign in independent expenditures. Bryan, you created the People's Pledge, stating, and correct me if I'm wrong, that for every independent expenditure, a donation to a charity of your choice would be made with hopes that this would discourage independent expenditures. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't create it. Elizabeth Warren did, but
okay.
yes,
okay.
I proposed it to the candidates in this race.
I'm going to have to get on Wikipedia.
I'd love to take that credit, but this has been used by Mayor Garcetti, Elizabeth Warren, Russ Feingold. A lot of campaign finance champions across the country have proposed this exact same thing.
Okay. Well, let's start with Jess. You chose to sign it. You want to tell me why?
Well, I actually have the truest grassroots campaign in this election, and that is because I have well over 6,000 individual donors, and that's without a single major endorsement from an institutional group. That is with real people donating an average of $45. And with that, we've raised almost $500,000. I think that's pretty darn impressive, and to me, getting big money and dark money to have a different role in politics, dark money completely out, is just fundamental to increasing who gets to participate in our political system. It just is appalling to me that only 0.58% of U.S. adults donate politically, but that's who decides who goes to D.C. And so basically, we've got millions and millions and millions of people who, if they even have an interest in the candidates who are running, maybe they'll get a chance to vote for them. They're not having a voice, and this pay-to-play politics is sickening. It utterly disgusts me. In science, we have to scrape and save every single penny that we get to do our research, and I don't see why dark money should be able to come in and influence people who are in their communities, who have the chance to learn about their candidates. If the candidates are doing their jobs and getting out and talking to people, then it really shouldn't be necessary, and we have to move away from this and actually get dark money out of elections. I believe it with my whole heart.
All right. So if you follow, I'm sure everybody knows where I'm going to go with this next, is Katie. You chose not to sign it.
Yep.
Would you like to tell us why?
Yeah, first I'd like to explain what an independent expenditure is, because before running for Congress, to be honest, I didn't know what it was. The current campaign finance laws that are in place mean that if you are a candidate, you cannot coordinate with an independent expenditure. You can't even know that they're going to be spending money on you. You can't know anything about it. That means that some outside group, whoever it may be, can come in and spend money either against another candidate or on your behalf, or to try and get you elected. But as a candidate, I felt completely handicapped in the sense that I have no idea what they're going to do. I don't know if they're going to get my message right. I don't know if they're going to go negative, which is something that I've felt very strongly I don't want to do. But fundamentally, I cannot say to my 5,000 donors that the people that what you have put into this race, your hard-earned dollars. I mean, I have people who are teachers who have donated well over $1,000. I mean, that is a lot. And I'm not going to say to them, sorry, I'm surrendering. I'm saying, you know, I can't control any of this stuff, but I'm going to take your money and instead donate it to somebody else's charity. If they wanted to donate to charity, they have many opportunities to do so, and they would do so. So it's about accountability to your donors. It's about running the kind of race that you want to run, and frankly, it's about not being hypocritical. When, you know, someone else proposed it that took literally $2.5 million in independent expenditure money. You didn't take it. I'm sorry. It was spent on that behalf. But then suddenly changes tunes after the independent expenditure money doesn't seem to be there. Then I'm not going to do it.
So you do support independent expenditures? Is that correct, Katie?
No, I don't support independent expenditures. I think it's a completely broken part of our system. But they're there, and I'm not going to dictate my campaign. And most importantly, I'm not going to play with other people's money.
Bryan, since you initially sent the proposal out to both Katie and Jess to sign, what is your response to what Katie just said?
Well, that's what's so brilliant about this plan that Elizabeth Warren used successfully in her Senate race, and Russ Feingold, you know, the author of the McCain-Feingold plan, is that you can't coordinate with an independent expenditure group, but when you take a public statement and say, if anyone spends money on my behalf, however much you spend, I'm donating it to charity, you make that public statement, they don't spend the money. So it just doesn't happen. And when you believe, like I believe, that millionaires and billionaires should not be buying elections, and that's what they do, they give hundreds of thousands of dollars to these groups that then spend it on a campaign and buy an election, you want to keep that out. Now, of course, in the last campaign, Steve Knight is not going to enter into this pledge. The only way it works is when all the candidates agree. So Congressman Knight is completely bought and paid for by these outside groups, by corporations, millionaires, billionaires. That's his entire campaign. But that's not what Democrats are supposed to stand for. Everyone on this stage has said they want to get money out of politics. Everyone on this stage has said they want to overturn Citizens United and keep millionaires and billionaires from buying our election. So it's supposed to be an easy sell to Democrats who claim they want campaign finance reform to say, let's actually make our campaign actions match our campaign promises. And I was really proud that Jess joined that, and I'm sorry it didn't work out for this election.
Am I able to
But
respond?
you are now using independent expenditure. You're allowing independent expenditures. You are not denouncing them because Katie didn't sign that pledge?
I don't know what it means to, I am denouncing them. I don't want any independent expenditures. I would like, the offer still stands any day for Katie to sign it. Jess and I have signed this, and the offer will stand to Congressman Knight in the general election as well. I'd love to get this money out of all of politics, but it doesn't work unless everyone agrees, and right now, everyone hasn't agreed.
Well, so you denounce any independent expenditures. Let me ask you a question then. If you win the primary, finish in the top two, and you're denouncing independent expenditures, what are you going to do when Steve Knight is using so much money and allowing independent expenditures on the other side? How are you going to compete with that?
No, that's what I'm saying, Stephen, is the point. It's a contractual pledge. That's why Elizabeth Warren proposed it, or actually Scott Brown proposed it. Elizabeth Warren agrees. It only functions when both sides are in it. So I have very little faith that Congressman Knight is going to agree with me that we need campaign finance reform, that we need publicly financed campaigns, that we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. I would love him to agree with that. I doubt he does. And so since he doesn't do that, it doesn't take effect. But amongst Democrats who claim to want campaign finance reform, it should be an easy sell.
Jess and Katie, I'd like to both give you 30 seconds to follow up on that. Jess, you first. Do you have any opinions on it?
Well,
Thoughts?
you know, I think that it really is leadership by example. If you want to change the system, you have to put your money where your mouth is. So I completely rejected the way that everybody I talked to told me to run a campaign. And that's why we did the grassroots route. Because I said, I'm up against some folks in this race, Republican and Democrat, who have big money rolling in left and right. And I'm a scientist. I don't have networks like that. So you gotta put your money where your mouth is and walk that line.
Katie?
Sure. So two fundamental pieces for me is, one, I believe strongly that I will not run a different campaign during this primary than I plan to in the general. So if I'm going to do something now, it's going to be something that I'm consistent with for the rest of the time. Secondly, I've run a large nonprofit. I know how important every single dollar is that goes into your budget. This is something that is truly fundamental, and I will not put my donors' money on the line for something that I simply can't control. That is not true, what was said about independent expenditures staying out when other candidates reject them, because in Elizabeth Warren's race, the Scott Bound Elizabeth Warren race, $12 million was spent on that campaign.
Time, Katie. All right, let's move on. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about immigration. It's a divisive issue in this country. I believe you all agree something must be done. California is currently challenging the federal government with the SB 54, and conversely, several cities have decided or are currently discussing that they do not want to be a sanctuary city, including Santa Clarita. My question to you is, what are you booing me for?
They're booing this.
I'm the messenger, guys.
Yeah.
My question to you is, do they have that right? What is your opinion of sanctuary cities existing in contrast to federal law? Katie,
Sure.
Start with you.
So, first of all, I think that Democrats, we've made a big mistake by adopting the use of the term sanctuary city. That's something that came from Republicans, it came from conservatives who are trying to say that we're sheltering criminals, and that's what we're doing. That is not what SB 54 is. That is not what any of these cities that are saying that they're sanctuary cities are about. They're about saying that we will not take a stand that shows that we don't want people who don't look like us here. It's that fundamental. It's about our values. It's about making sure that we show that while we are about, we believe that we need to keep our communities safe, we're not going to use local resources to follow, frankly, a federal policy that is just scapegoating, pure scapegoating and fear-mongering, plain and simple. So to be able to stand up and say, this is who we are as a country. We're a country that is built on immigrants. We're a community here in Santa Clarita that is such a part of the fabric of what we do. It's our friends, our family members, our neighbors. My own family members are immigrants. And to be able to stand up and say, this is not who we are. We are not fear-mongers. We are not afraid of people who don't look like us. And we welcome everyone who wants to live here and wants to be part of our community.
You have 17 seconds to spare. I'll allow you to do a dance. All right.
It's a terrible dance, sorry.
Jess, we'll go to you now. Same question.
No.
All right, so clap for me if you know somebody who's an immigrant. That's what I thought. I mean, not only are we a country built of immigrants, but California, I mean, it used to be Mexico. So, yeah, it's real inconvenient when people like to forget that. And, I think that what really bothered me recently was that Simi Valley had a town meeting, a city meeting, where they did it behind closed doors. And the supporters in favor of the rejecting the sanctuary city vote, those supporters were out there in number, and people who opposed it were not notified. So to me, that is really against the public process that we have for making decisions as a community. I don't want to see Santa Clarita go that route. I want everybody to attend the city council meeting that's coming up about sanctuary city status. And I use the air quotes because that isn't a legal term. It is, it's misleading, and it really is polarizing. So we have to reject that notion. And what we also must make clear is that cities and states that have this status of not cooperating and lending resources to federal immigration enforcement, those are safer places. I mean, we live in a relatively safe community, especially compared to some cities that, are not, quote unquote, sanctuary cities. So don't let them guide the conversation. Don't let them prejudice us artificially. Everyone belongs here.
Time. Bryan, do you support the concept of sanctuary cities? You're a lawyer. Does the city and the state, what is the issue? Does the state have the right to turn around and say we're going to allow sanctuary cities? And does the city, in contrast with that, can they say we don't want to be a sanctuary city?
Yeah, so this is one of those situations where the Trump administration just has it so wrong. And what they're trying to do not only isn't constitutional, it goes exactly against the beliefs of what conservatives claim they believe in. They want to take, what they're trying to do is have the federal government overreach and basically conscript local officials and force them into doing work for the federal government. What happened to state rights? That's you got to ask that question. That Jeff Sessions has been a real states' right guy his entire life until he became Attorney General for this president, as they try to launch an all-out assault and war on the state of California, and that's wrong. And so they have no basis to make this claim. They are going to lose in court. They cannot conscript state and local officials to do their bidding, and so it's just misguided. It leads to less safe communities. As Jess was saying, when people in a community feel safe and feel like they can trust and cooperate with authorities, they are more likely to report crimes, serve as witnesses, and get the real bad people arrested and off the street so we can have that safer community we all want.
You have 15 seconds left. Do you want to do a dance?
Now, too.
Do you want to do a dance? No? Okay.
You don't want to see me dance, I'll tell you.
I still want some Garth Brooks karaoke. So.
You don't want to hear that either.
All right. We all know that you all support some type of immigration reform and helping DACA recipients. What would you offer as a bargaining chip to the Trump administration to save DACA and get immigration reform? Let's start with Jess.
A bargaining chip? These are people's lives, Stephen. Why did you word it like that? Oh my God. My mother-in-law is not a bargaining chip.
I didn't say they were, Jess.
No, I know, but oh my God, just the fact that we have to say, what are you going to offer up to them in order to get them to treat people as humans? That is appalling. Oh my goodness. Okay. And you know what? It's not Stephen, again, don't shoot the messenger, but that is the attitude, it's a tit for tat sort of thing. But in reality, let's make the economic argument. If we are to do, if the people in our community, the over 5,100 DACA recipients and DACA eligible people in our district, if those people were to be deported, we would lose $159 million annually. That is a lot of money. Now multiply that across the entire country, and then that's only the DACA folks. If you extrapolate that to the larger immigrant population that's here undocumented, we would be in a hell of a mess. So it only makes common sense from a humanitarian and economic perspective.
But let me do a follow-up on that, okay? My point being, using the term bargaining chip, Republicans control the House right now. You're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to convince them to allow DACA. So what would you do?
Have you heard of the blue wave? So I am all about working with people when it doesn't come to people's lives that are being played with. When it comes to people's lives, I will never back down, and I will work with people to build coalitions to get the job done. That is what you need to do. And you know what? You can compromise. Sure, fund their goofy wall. It's a geological impossibility. So let them have it, because it ain't gonna happen. But get that bill signed. Get a Clean Dream Act through now.
All right. Bryan, I'm glad you said that, Jess, because Jess said that at the Palmdale debate, and right before she did, you said that building a wall was a stupid idea. So I'm wondering.
El muro es horrible. Or estúpido, whatever.
Not your turn. Is it a stupid idea, or is the way Jess presenting it smart?
Well, I think it's a stupid idea. I'm not going to vote to fund a wall. It is something I fundamentally disagree with. It's the wrong message. It's ineffective. It's just terrible for this country, and we should not be wasting money doing it. I also do not think we can use people as bargaining chips. There are some of those issues that we as Democrats have to recognize are part of our core values, and we need to stand firm on those. And this is one of those, recognizing how important immigrants are to our community, how amazing they make this community, and how we need to be there supporting them. And this is something that crosses party lines. First off, I think we are going to have the majority when I get to Congress, but regardless, 60 to 70% of the people in this country support Dreamers, as they should. And so this is a common sense idea with broad support. We just need to have people in Congress who will actually put it up for a vote, because when it goes up for a vote, it will pass and we will start protecting our community.
Katie, your turn.
Sure. Well, I hate to break it to you, but Donald Trump was elected for 4 years, and even if we're able to get rid of him, we're going to have Mike Pence. I know we're going to have a blue wave, right? We're going to show up, and there's going to be a huge Democratic majority, hopefully in both the House and the Senate, but with laws, you still have to have the president sign them. So fundamentally, I completely agree with both of you. I have said from day one that DACA recipients need assurances right now. We need to fix this. We need to pass a clean DACA right now. But to be able to pass a clean DACA, to pass a DACA at all, I can't stand by and say to these hundreds of thousands of people in our communities that you're going to have to wait. We won't pass anything until we have a president that will sign it. I just don't believe in that. I don't think that's the way that our government's supposed to work. I think we have to find ways of making something happen today, right now, because anything else is unacceptable. And that to me means, yes, we're going to fund more border security because we should. We should have protections from illegal drug trafficking, illegal sex trafficking, and to me that's the case that should be made.
All right, let's talk a little bit about living in the district. There's been an issue brought up about living in this district, both in the previous election and this one as well. Let's start with Bryan. This living in the district, how does that qualify you as a candidate, the length of time? Does that matter? Is it important to know your district or have roots in the district?
Well, look, what I'll tell you is if you think that the most important thing is how long someone has lived in the district, then I direct you to Steve Knight. Because that guy has called the Antelope Valley home his entire life, and he has taken vote after vote after vote to destroy this community. And so what we need is somebody who will fight for this community, who will stand up for this community, who has a history of standing up for this community. That's why I've been protesting and standing alongside the community at Porter Ranch with the gas leak when Steve Knight wasn't and no one else on this stage was. That's why I was at Stevenson Ranch at the Chiquita Canyon landfill hearing testifying to shut that down when Steve Knight was trying to keep it open. That's why I've been going around and talking to so many people from Lake Los Angeles to Simi Valley and everywhere in between about how we have such an opportunity right now to get someone in office who isn't going to close the blinds, lock the door, and call the sheriff's department whenever you try to exercise your First Amendment right to discuss what's important in our community. So I'm really, really proud to live in this amazing place with my wife, Lisa. The schools are great. The people are great. This is such a wonderful place to call home, but it could be so much better if we just had a representative who would once and for all fight for us.
All right, let's go to Katie. Katie, you call yourself a daughter of the district. Steve Knight has lived here, the district longer, yet I'm assuming you believe he hasn't represented this district well. Why should living here in the longest have anything to do with being a good representative?
Sure. Well, first of all, to represent a district, I believe you have to understand the district. And you don't get to do that when you move here in order to run for Congress. So the protests, I believe, that Bryan mentioned, did you do any of those before you moved here to run in 2016?
I did them when I was not running for office, yes.
But just for a fact, did you do them before you announced to run in 2016?
So the Aliso Canyon gas leak was in October 22nd of 2015, a week before I declared, or 2 weeks before I declared, and I was right out there as soon as the leak happened.
Well,
yes.
knowing what it's like to declare for Congress, you certainly know a few weeks before you're going to do it. But nonetheless, why does it matter to be a representative here?
Hey, guys, come on.
Why does it matter to be from this district? Is because we, as a community, are different than other places. We just are. That's what makes this place special. That's why I've spent my entire life here between Antelope Valley and Santa Clarita Valley. I love this place. And I don't need polling to tell me what are the issues that matter the most to people, because I know, because I've lived them. I've seen my friends and family members and neighbors experience them every single day. And I don't have to talk to any consultants about it because they're my issues. They're the issues that I care about. They're about healthcare, rebuilding the middle class, ensuring that we have a representative government. And to have a representative government, you need someone who represents you.
Before we go to Jess, I have a question specifically on this for Jess. Before we do, just to clarify something, their time is their time. If Katie wants to ask a question or Bryan wants to ask a question to another candidate, I don't care. So it's up to them. If they want to get up there and do a song and dance during their time, it's fine.
We'll save that for later.
Big on the dancing.
So, Jess, going back to the issue about the, what is your take on the issue? Because some have called you a carpetbagger. In fact, when I first interviewed you, you were still living in Burbank. And so if you can just clarify what your ties are to this community.
So I moved here when Steve Knight wasn't our representative. When Buck McEwen was still in is when I moved to the district. And I moved here actually because I didn't have the luxury of staying in one place my whole life. My parents were FBI agents. I didn't have roots as a kid. So I had to create my own. And when I married my husband, Carlos, back in 2010, we went away for me to go to grad school in Australia. When we moved back, we could have moved anywhere in the world. He works on computers. I work in geology. There's both of those things all over. But we chose to come back, and we made our home in Simi Valley, about a mile from my father-in-law. That gets a little uncomfortable. And so actually, we left Simi because of a number of things, one of which is actually that our horses were poisoned. They were right back up next to a bike path there in Simi, and I don't like to talk about it because they're my babies. But one of them made it, one of them didn't. And we had to board the one who did at a stable near the LA Equestrian Center so I could visit him 4 times a day. And we also didn't need people to know where we were. So Burbank was a brief stop before we bought our property in Acton. I have been working out here in this community for 11 years as a scientist. And when you're a geologist, you deal with everybody, particularly little roadside convenience stores. And so you really get to see what a place is like when you deal with the people who live there every day. And we chose this community because it reminds me of my home in Colorado and the best that California has to offer. And I think that that's a really good reason to be here.
Okay. Well, I think I just want to take a quick poll. Who wants to say they have the most locally based campaign from this district? Great. Now we're really going to have a fight. Well, then let's go around the room here and just say, why do you have the most locally based campaign? Bryan, we'll start with you.
Look,
you have 1 minute. I'm sorry, 1 minute for this.
Look, we're all running campaigns in this district, but I am really proud that all 18 labor unions in this district to endorse a candidate have endorsed our campaign. That is thousands and thousands of people who are in this community, who are knocking doors, who are spreading the message, whose livelihoods literally depend on getting a representative who will fight for them. And I'm really proud that they have all endorsed this campaign. We have dozens of local officials who've endorsed our campaign, more than even Steve Knight. And when 80% of the local officials in this district are Republican, and I have more of them endorsing this campaign, that says something. And when every Democratic club in this district to endorse has endorsed this campaign, I feel really good about what we're doing, how we're expanding this base, and how we're going to spend the next 192 days knocking on doors, talking to voters, and showing how out of touch Steve Knight is, and how we got a great chance to take this community back.
Bryan, my question to you, though, is just real quickly, how many employees are from the 25th District that you have employed in your campaign?
Employees on the campaign, a third of our campaign staff is from originally the district.
Okay. All right. Katie, same question to you. You said you have the most locally based campaign?
Well, I'll base that on how people actually contribute to a campaign and who is contributing to our campaign. I would open it up to any of the other candidates that I will show you how many donors that we actually have from this district, because the vast majority of them are under the $200 limit of how much you can contribute to a campaign, so they aren't listed on your FEC reports. But I guarantee you that I have a heck of a lot more than anybody else standing here, because this is my network. These are my friends, my family members, my neighbors, and my former teachers, the people who have lived in this community for years that are investing in this campaign. Not just in terms of money, but also in terms of volunteers, boots on the ground, people who are truly, who are knocking their neighbors' doors. They're not people who are coming up from just outside of the district. They're people who are from here. We have 2,000 volunteers, 2,000 people who are volunteering on this campaign. And I don't have the number for you. I don't know off the top of my head how many of them are from here and how many aren't, but I know that every single time that I go to meet some of my volunteers, they're people that I've known a long time and that live here. And going back, well, I'm out of time, but.
All right, time. Jess, you say you have the most locally based campaign.
So I'd say that for a couple of reasons, one of which is estoy escuchando a la comunidad, todo de la comunidad. So I'm not just talking to people who I can talk to because I speak English. I'm using the Spanish language skills that I have and worked on for years to get to actually go and listen to people who've never been listened to before. Going to places where people have literally never had a representative visit them, like Lake Los Angeles. And you know, we're actually joining the Cinco de Mayo parade in Lake LA next weekend, which is going to be quite an adventure. I'm pretty excited. But you know, it was exciting to me to see how many people who are from here said, you get it. You get that we have these unique environmental challenges all around the district, both earthquakes and man-made hazards, wildfires, everything else. They say, we get that you're speaking to everybody, that you're not cutting anybody out of the conversation because they can't afford to donate. And that really makes me proud. I'm so excited to see how many people here really believe in what I'm trying to do.
I want to do some quick follow-ups here. But the first one I want to ask is, Bryan, you said that you've received endorsements from every Democratic club?
To endorse.
To endorse.
Correct.
Did the Los Angeles County Young Democrats endorse you?
And that's why I said the clubs in the district. That's, again, every Democratic club in the district to endorse. So that's the Young Dems, that's North Valley, that's the Southeast Antelope Valley Initiative. Every Democratic club in the district to endorse has endorsed our campaign.
All right. I'd like to go down the line just real quick for 30 seconds each and just find out where's the bulk of your funding coming from. So we'll start with Katie. Is it coming from the district or is it outside the district?
The bulk of it in terms of dollars
Yes.
they're not coming from this district because I don't know that many people who can donate $2,700 at the drop of a hat here. Anyone? Anyone? If you can, thank you. Appreciate it. But the rest of us can't. So when you're talking about the dollars that are raised, yeah, more people are donating, more volume is coming from outside the district. When you're talking about individual donors, the number of donors, we have by far more from inside the district than outside.
Okay. Bryan, same question. Where's the bulk of your funding coming from?
Yeah, the bulk of the campaign contributions are coming from people. And I think that's a big difference that all
Inside
three
the
of
district?
that's the difference that all three of us have that's between us and Steve Knight. He's getting 70% of his money from corporate PACs, from organizations, and we're getting 95, 96% from individuals who are contributing to the campaign.
Jess?
So actually, I would totally challenge Katie on that, having more in-district donors, because we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, we may have even broken the thousands by now, of in-district donors who have donated small dollar amounts, again, not under the $200 FEC limit. We have people who give $3, and a lot of them actually come from here. But the bulk of the money for me comes from regular folks donating $45. We've had donors from all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. So people really believe that I can make the change we need in DC.
All right. These are some direct questions that were put together from our anonymous committee, and as well as some were actually from the candidates to the other candidates. We'll start with Bryan. Your campaign has been known to lead on negativity about how awful Congressman Knight is and Trump's policies. So here's a two-part question for you, Bryan. What is your campaign's vision outside of that? And has Congressman Knight done anything positive? There are those that would say he's been extremely good to this district for aeronautical industry and for the veterans. What do you think?
I think that the bad votes Congressman Knight take so outweigh whatever good you might be able to point to that it's kind of an exercise in futility. And so just frankly, and I don't believe it is negative. When you point out a person's vote or you point out a person's quote and that is seen as being negative, then what does that tell you about their votes? What does that tell you about their quotes? And so I am going to talk about the fact that Steve Knight voted to take 57,000 people in our community's health care away. I'm going to talk about the fact that he's a Donald Trump rubber stamp, that he has no exceptions for a woman's right to choose, that he co-sponsored legislation to allow an employer to fire a single woman if she gets pregnant or takes birth control. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. And I don't really care if he wants to come back and talk about how he spent the weekend cutting a ribbon at the new Jimmy John's when he is destroying lives in our community. He wants to tear families apart, take health care away, and I will not stand for it because he does a few photo ops on the weekend.
Well, okay, so we've seen the negative side there. What's the positive of your campaign? What is the outlook? What are you going to do for the district that's different than I'm not going to vote the way Steve Knight is?
Right, we're going to fight for Medicare for all because every single person in this country, in this community, deserves health care. We're going to get comprehensive immigration reform, not just for DACA with a pathway to citizenship, but for the other people in this country who don't have DACA or don't have a DACA status right now. We are going to fight for jobs, improve our local broadband, get better transportation, fight for water security. There is so much we could do if we looked out for the community and not the corporations and billionaires who do Paul Ryan and Donald Trump's bidding, just like Steve Knight.
All right.
Stephen, I have
Here's
a
a
question.
question.
Oops, sorry.
So go ahead.
What does it look like for responses from the other candidates?
You may go, you
Questions?
can respond.
Okay.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
So I totally get not going, that we're pointing out the differences between Steve Knight and what we are about. That should be. I mean, the whole reason that we're trying to replace him is because of these votes. That's guaranteed. That's the reason that we're doing this. But I would like to ask, what about the negativity towards our campaign, for example, including a document that was entitled 12 Reasons That Katie Hill Doesn't Share Our Values that was shared at the Democratic Party convention, that was authored by the campaign manager?
Bryan,
Unfortunately,
you have 30 seconds.
yeah. As you know, it was not shared at the convention by our campaign.
No, I know
and
that
that's
it
just
was.
a flat-out lie.
That is not true.
And-
I know for a fact that it was because it got back to my hands.
And it's just not true, and you shouldn't spread lies, and it's unfortunate. And so, with absolute certainty, nothing was shared. With absolute certainty. I know Katie has talked about emails that were sent that they just don't exist.
Bryan, I have them. Bryan, I have them, and many other people have them. So when you talk about flat-out lies, let's not do it right now.
Jess, feed it!
Thank you, John. I'd know that voice anywhere.
Well, we'll do a direct question to Katie from Jess, actually. Katie, you identify as bisexual and have been endorsed by groups like Equality California and the Stonewall Democrats. While you have said that you are a voice for equality in this campaign, what specific actions have you taken to stand up for LGBTQ rights, and what will you do specifically for the LGBTQ community in Congress based on your lived experience?
Sure. That's a great question. First is, one of the big issues, the biggest issues that the LGBT community is facing is disparities in access to healthcare, disparities in access to housing, and the high rate of the number of LGBTQ youth that become homeless. It is by far the biggest population within the under 25 group of kids that are experiencing homelessness are the LGBT youth. So the reason that I have and can be a voice for this is because my own experience, I've been privileged. I'm not going to pretend I haven't. I've never been, discriminated against because I'm bisexual. That's just not something that I've had to deal with. But I do know and I see the very real issues that my community faces on a day-to-day basis, even though I haven't had to deal with it. And fundamentally, that kind of experience, that kind of advocacy, and that kind of ability to be a champion for the issues that we face, for the rights that we deserve, I can actually absolutely do that.
Jess, you want to respond to that, or no?
No,
You
I
let it go?
just wanted to ask the question. Yeah.
All right, well, let's do a direct question to you then. At the Palmdale debate, you stated that you supported a progressive tax, and then said in the same statement that you supported a flat tax.
Yeah, let me clarify.
I was going to give you that opportunity,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
apparently a lot of people are confused.
Yeah, I don't support a flat tax. I don't support any particular tax. What I do want to do is make sure that when we actually get a chance to do tax reform again, that we consider all of our options. And I'm sure that answer was a bit muddled at that particular debate. What I mean, and what I actually believe, to clear the air, is that we need to examine every single option for taxation when we get a chance to do it again. What the Republicans just did, they'd like to tout as tax reform. It's not. It's just tax cuts. And most likely, we won't have a chance to actually do tax reform for about another 30 years. That's the time span that we had since the last go-around. So in the meantime, should any issues about taxation come up, I want to make sure that, as a scientist, I have all of the data available to me and consider all the possible options before making a choice. I think that's fair. And I think that's what people want to see in representatives, is somebody who will say, look, yes, I will consider all the options and discard the ones that obviously are going to hurt people. And I believe that a flat tax, because it's supposed to be proportional, but in fact oftentimes is regressive, would be very, very harmful to many people. And so it's something that, while we can say there's one option, there's another, pretty quickly we'll realize that that's not something we want to serve for dinner. And we need to work on making our tax code, next time we get the chance, actually fair and simple and revenue neutral. Yeah, that was an exciting question. Yay, taxes.
All right, our next question goes to Bryan. This one's from Katie. Let's follow this up, what was brought before. Many were surprised that you've lost the endorsements of many elected and party leaders that supported you last cycle and even earlier in this campaign. This resulted in an unexpected non-endorsement by the California State Democratic Party. Why do you think these leaders changed their minds?
Look, I'm not going to speak for any person. What I'll tell you is I'm really grateful by the fact that at the California Democratic Party process, I got 3 times the votes of the next closest person. I'm really proud of the fact that we've got more than 3 dozen local officials in this district endorsing our campaign, which is dozens more than any other candidate running. I'm really proud that every single labor union in this district has endorsed this campaign. And so we're building a coalition from corner to corner in this district that's just continuing what we already started, of being the 5th closest race in the country and just spreading the message to talk about how much better we can do. And if we keep spreading that message for another 192 days, we're going to win here. And if 22 of our friends across the country do the same thing, we're going to be able to start taking our country back. And I'm really excited about that.
But, yeah, let me ask you this. And you didn't get the endorsement this time or the previous time. And according to, you lost over 20% of the pre-endorsement for the California convention. So what happened? Do you know what happened? I mean, what's changing people's minds, or what changed people's minds?
Look, as I said, I'm not going to speak for other people, but it's a different group of people who vote in the two. Mm-hmm. And so what I know is that at the California Democratic Party convention, I got more than 3 times the votes of any other person. That feels pretty good to know the level of support on the ground, that with 8 people in the race at that time, with 8 people running, we got 53% of the vote. The next closest, after a year in the campaign, Katie got 15% of the vote. And so I feel really good about what we're building, and we're just going to keep it going for the next 6 months, and we're going to be able to flip this district.
Katie, this is your question, so I'll let you follow up. I'll give you a minute.
I would love to respond. Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that the people who voted in the Democratic Party convention, I have never once asked for people's vote. I always said, let's go non-endorsement. Let's give people in this district an opportunity to vote for the person that they want. And that's exactly what we asked for from the very beginning. So people who did vote for me, I'm grateful. I know that I earned your support earlier on than many others, but fundamentally I said we should go non-endorsement. So that's point one. The second point is that I don't feel like you answered the question in terms of why so many people have lost your campaign, you've lost the support of so many people in your campaign. I just feel like that's something that the people deserve to hear at least your perspective on, if not fact. If not, you can't read people's minds, right?
I certainly can't read people's mind. What I know is that I've gained the support of more than anybody running in this campaign, and that's why we've got over 3 dozen local officials who've endorsed our campaign. We've got every labor union who've endorsed our campaign, so I'm just not aware of what this mass exodus is when we've got, more support and grassroots support that we're just continuing to build. And so we can go back and forth on this forever, but the numbers are the numbers, and I can't fight math.
Oh, okay. Well,
Katie, I'll give you 30 seconds, then I want to go to Jess.
So, Yeah, the numbers are the numbers, but when every single person, every endorsement, actually, let me throw it back a different way. What endorsement have you gained since the beginning of this year in terms of a labor union or an elected official? I think this is an issue. Does anyone else think this is an issue? All right, thank you.
Well, I'll acknowledge the audience. I'm going to ask a question to Jess. We'll move on then. Okay, we'll move on. Easy, guys. Easy. Wow. Jess, the interesting thing is Jess, the interesting thing to me, I'm told from at the convention, was you were going around just saying, hey, what's going on, but didn't seem to be seeking an endorsement. Why is that?
So, first-time candidate. I don't have a bunch of high-paid consultants telling me how to do things because I rejected that model. And so I actually had a previous staff member who was helping me run the campaign, and he did not submit me for endorsement of the state party. So I thought, hey, you know what? I still need to go because people need to know I'm in the race. And honestly, I am not that concerned about endorsements before the primary. I am concerned about getting regular people and having them talk to me, and so that I can actually understand what their particular issues are. So you do that when you're at a convention, but those are political insiders. They're people like you all who are really invested in this, some of you for many, many years. But you have to remember that there's a whole world out there of people who they need your time. They need your time more than anything else. And so focus of my campaign hasn't been on getting the endorsements that come when you have the most money. My time has been focused on saying, how many regular people can I reach and talk to and connect with on social media or via email or via videos? And it's been really rewarding. I mean, the kind of support I've gotten, I have so many people saying, I have literally never voted before, and I'm voting for you. I have never donated before, and I'm donating to you. And that's what it's all about, right? It's opening the doors and getting the hell out of the way. That's what we need to do as representatives. We need to let the people speak.
Well, you talk about endorsements not mattering that much, but you do kind of tout celebrities that have endorsed your candidate.
I think it's cool. I mean, come on. Again, honesty, right? And you know why a lot of those folks have gotten on board is because... John Billingsley, again, ladies and gentlemen.
Star Trek, people.
But that's the thing is, I'm a scientist. Scientists were the nerds when I was growing up. And now I have people who have been on Star Trek, and they're like, what you're doing is so essential and vital. Absolutely vital. And I know it's funny, but it's also true. Science needs a voice in society, and I'm here to bring it.
Time. Let's go back around on another issue here. This time, we'll start with Jess again. Talk about President Trump. No,
I have some things I could say, but I just didn't.
Well,
okay.
let's just cut to the chase here. Based on what you've seen of President Trump and his actions, is it premature to talk about impeachment yet? If not,
okay.
Why have you seen? What have you seen that makes you think otherwise? And if it is premature, what would constitute impeachment?
So you may not know, but I'm not Bob Mueller. I know I look a lot like him, but so I don't actually know what he's found in his investigation yet. And I'm a big fan of the rule of law and making sure that we go through legal processes. And I think we owe that to our democratic institutions. So while I personally may say get Trump out, again, we need to consider what happens if we do that and what that does to us as a country. So I don't want to make any moves towards saying we must impeach unless we have the evidence. Again, scientists, give me the facts, give me the evidence, and then you better believe I'll vote to impeach if there is evidence. So that is what I can do, is just like any other policy that I would be working on in Congress, is I will say that if I have evidence and facts that are pointing me in a particular direction, I will follow those. That is how we should be governing, evidence-based policymaking, and we have to do that with our president as well, because we have these institutions set up. The Congress has a role, and that's one of the things I want to do is, when I get there, is to act as a check and balance on what Trump's craziness wants to do that day. Although I can't do anything about Twitter, I'm sorry.
But I mean, haven't we seen a lot of crazy already? I mean,
we have, but we also have a Congress that's pretty much complicit. So by changing who we have in D.C., by having people who aren't beholden to party interests or large money donors, dark money, we can actually go in there and say, I'm accountable to you all. And that's why I'm running the kind of race I'm running, because if you are not afraid of what the power pullers, puppet masters can do, then you are free to stand up for what's right.
So to clarify, your answer is a simple no, not yet.
Not yet. You got to wait for the evidence.
Okay.
Show
Bryan,
me something.
You're an attorney. Tell me what, based on what you've seen, are there grounds for impeachment yet?
Yeah, so based on everything I've seen, the amount of corruption in this administration is just outrageous. I believe he's breaking the law with impunity on a regular basis. But what we need to do before moving forward is making sure we do get all the facts. And that's not just the job of Bob Mueller. That is the constitutional role that Congress is supposed to play. And so I look forward to getting into office, serve those subpoenas, put witnesses under oath, uncover the truth, and get this information out to the public, because the only way that you can even get to a discussion of impeachment is if you have Republican buy-in. And right now, we don't have the public evidence to get that Republican buy-in. But I'm pretty darn confident that if you have qualified people who are asking the questions of people under oath, we know about so much corruption just from being on the outside, just from the hard work of journalists. But if we actually had a Congress that fulfilled their constitutional duty to get to the truth, I think there would be no way Republicans could turn their head, and we would absolutely have buy-in to hold this president accountable when he breaks the law.
So to be clear, your answer is no, not yet? Your answer is no right now, not yet?
My answer is we need to get the truth out there so we have Republican buy-in, because that's what's critical for our republic.
So no, not yet. Okay, Katie, your turn.
Yeah, agreed. We need the evidence. We all have seen the evidence that President Trump is a disaster, if we're being honest, and is completely dysfunctional and has created chaos of what should be the highest possible standard of the people that represent our country. That said, I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty afraid of a Mike Pence presidency too. So I think that we have to go through the process. We have to find the evidence. We have to, if somebody's broken the law, you have to hold them accountable to it. But I don't think that should be our answer for two reasons. The first is President Pence, I think, would be more effective at getting terrible legislation passed. And the second is that I believe that we as a country should make the decision on whether someone should be president or not, mainly because if we don't, then everything else falls apart. And we will have a complete reverse effect of what happened in the past, which is that people he can be a martyr. President Trump can be a martyr for people. We don't want to allow that to happen.
I'm going to do a foreign policy question. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Iran nuclear deal, seems to be in a crisis mode right now. President Trump has kicked it back to Congress. They've done no action on it. And Trump is threatening to back out of the deal completely. I mean, that's what leaders of France and Germany were in town basically for in D.C. recently, was to say don't do that. My question to you is, do you support this deal? And if you do not support it, what do you propose as an alternative? We'll start with Jess.
The Iran deal is actually a very beneficial deal for the United States and for everyone around the world who is not a fan of nuclear warfare. It really does a lot of key things in restricting Iran from actually obtaining nuclear weapons. They've been forced to reduce the amount of uranium that they can enrich dramatically. They have been forced to actually reduce supplies and development efforts for 10 years. And Trump, by so casually and cavalierly saying he would get rid of the deal because it's bad, is really harming national security. That is something that we need to make sure Congress acts on. We need to keep the Iran deal. And you know what? We can work on improving it and making it more advantageous. But right now, we run the risk as a country of setting something in motion that could really harm a lot of people. And I think that if people really aren't paying attention to it, you probably should. Read up on the history of Iran and what the United States' relationship is with it. It's very complex. And right now, they have actually made efforts to be a little bit more inclusive, even though they have a religious society that's, their government's based in religion. They're trying to be more inclusive. And I think the fact that they came to the table to work on this agreement, which is only a couple of years old, is a really good sign for achieving denuclearization. So let's keep pushing to keep the Iran deal. Let's call our member of Congress, get old Steve on the phone and say, you need to keep the Iran deal. Do whatever you can.
Let me do one quick question to you then, just a simple yes or no.
Okay.
If you had been in Congress at the time that had gone through, that deal was going through, would you have supported it?
Knowing the facts about the deal, yes.
Okay. Katie, same thing, questions to you.
Yeah. The Iran deal is an example of how diplomacy and how sanctions can work, because no matter, we have over and over again seen that the folks who are holding Iran accountable, who are checking to see whether they're upholding their end of the bargain, we've had 10 times now that they have been. So if we back out, if we're the ones who don't uphold our end of the bargain, that sets a dangerous precedent. That means that any time that we're trying to go into a negotiation, that we are saying to the rest of the world, let's make a deal, which President Trump is supposedly the king of, that we can't back out. You just can't. We have an obligation to fulfill our end of the bargain as long as the other side is upholding theirs. And until we have any kind of evidence to believe that they're not, we have to uphold ours.
So you would have supported the deal?
Yes.
Okay. Bryan, we've had this discussion before. So I'd like to know what are your thoughts on the deal right now, and if you would have voted for it initially.
Look, we're at a scary time right now, I think, in our country and the world. I believe Donald Trump is a clear and present threat to our national security. I do not trust him. And I really don't trust the people that he has surrounded himself. Pompeo, John Bolton, these are people that I am very, very concerned are going to be leading us towards war when the basis for it simply is not there. And so we have a deal in place that was negotiated painstakingly with many, many countries around the world that is working, that is keeping us safe, that has slowed down Iran's nuclear program. And it would be really foolish for us to blow that up right now. And I use that term on purpose. It would be very, very concerning. And it would also really hamstring America's ability to use diplomacy in the future, to reach these solutions, because when another country thinks that we're just going to pull out of it a year and a half, 2 years later, if another president disagrees, then America loses that ability to be a moral leader. We have 4-year terms for the president, but these deals are supposed to last much longer. But if we start showing that we're going to pull out of them willy-nilly whenever we change our mind, why would any country in the future enter into that agreement with us? That's a scary proposition. We need to be using our allies and diplomacy more now than ever, and so it's absolutely essential that we don't back out of it in May, and I support the program in place.
Would you have supported it?
Knowing all the facts, absolutely.
Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about millennials. It is interesting to me that all three of you are millennials. Bryan, you're on the cusp, but
I'm younger than Jess.
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Okay, Jess, you're on the cusp.
Literally, no one believes that.
I know, I got too much gray in my hair.
What does your generation bring to the party in a post-9/11 world? And does that justify a change in leadership in the Democratic Party? The reason I ask that is because there seems to be some divisiveness in the Democratic Party. And I'm curious if you would support the current leadership or push for a new leadership if elected. We'll start with Katie.
Yeah, I'm curious why you asked a post-9/11 world. I'm just really quick.
Well, because in a certain sense that you've grown up with us constantly at war.
Gotcha. Okay.
Since
Yeah. So a couple things. The first is the millennial generation is the largest voting bloc at this point. We have the most people who can vote, and yet we only have 5 members of Congress who are millennials out of 435. That's a shame. That's actually just pure lack of a representative government. And it's our generation that is going to have to deal with the problems that the previous generations of leaders have failed to address for far too long. So we need more millennials in Congress. We need to have that voice. In terms of leadership, and I know you're talking about Nancy Pelosi, right? Congresswoman Pelosi. She's been created she's been turned into a divisive figure, and I don't believe that that's fair, to be honest with you, and I think there's a great deal of sexism involved with that. But what I do know is that when we get in there, in next year, when I'm a freshman member of Congress, we need leadership, because as a party, as Democrats, if we take over the House and hopefully the Senate, we have to be effective. We have to immediately get in there and accomplish things. And I know that somebody with a track record of having done that effectively is probably our best bet at making that happen right away. But at the same time, we need to cultivate a new generation of leaders who are able to move in there and take those leadership positions, but that takes mentorship. I've done succession planning for our organization. You can't do that overnight, and we need to be effective right now.
Jess, same question.
It's really weird when I get wrangled into the millennial category because I had been working for 2 years when 9/11 happened, and I was in college at that point, and I don't think either of you were in college.
High school.
2 weeks before.
Yeah, 2 weeks before. Okay, all right. So I was going to my second year, but at any rate, it's funny because sometimes I feel like the old fart, which is hilarious because we're all young still. But what I really see as a valuable asset to our generation is that we are a bridge generation, and I remember what it was like to have a pager when people didn't have cell phones all the time. And I actually used a rotary phone. That's a thing. And so remembering what life was like pre-computer, it allows us to bridge that gap, that knowledge gap, that learning gap that we see on display when Zuckerberg's testifying in front of the House and the Senate. Particularly Orrin Hatch. Yeah, that was sad. But we have a duty to lead the way in technology and innovation and bringing that connection point between the tech generation that's grown up with screens in front of them all the time and the older folks like our parents, hi mom and dad, and those people are often feeling alienated with today's society. So we get the privilege of being able to create that bridge. Leadership is a process, and I think that with new leadership, we will see new ideas and innovation, but you also have to remember the older generations have a lot to offer. So we cannot just throw everybody out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to take stock and say, what kind of coalition do we have?
Time. Bryan, your turn. As a millennial, do you support the idea of new leadership or the current leadership?
Look, what I can say, one of the most exciting parts of this campaign is seeing how engaged young people are. And we're all witnessing that from Parkland. These kids have been amazing. It has spread the country. It happens right here. I spend every single week, I try to speak at a different high school or a different middle school and talk to kids and try to get them involved in this process. And the teachers, without exception, say they've never seen engagement like this before. They used to have to, it was like pulling teeth to get the kids to talk about current events, and now they come in wanting to talk about it. That's amazing, and it's exciting because when young people are involved, it leads to a better country. They are progressive, they believe in equality, they care about the environment, they want to stop gun violence. It's really, really exciting to have them engaged. So we better not waste this opportunity. And we better make sure that we get people in office who are going to listen to those voices and who are going to represent them. And so that's what I really hope happens across this country, that when we have that blue wave we all hope happens, when we get a lot of new people in office, we don't forget who voted, who knocked those doors, who spread the word and made it happen. And if we don't forget that, if we take that new leadership into Congress, we can start getting policies in place that will help people. We can forget about the old ways where Washington is just totally dysfunctional, and we can actually start improving lives for people.
All right. I'd like to talk a little bit about education. And in particular, one of the things that's interesting is, just the basic philosophy since the 80s of the role of government between Democrats and Republicans. What do you believe the role of the federal government should be in education? And how would you support that role? Bryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, look, both my parents were public school teachers. My mom taught special education in elementary school. My dad was a high school English teacher. I went to public schools my whole life. Everything I have is because of the opportunities that good public schools can provide. And it's really, really frustrating to see the massively misplaced priorities that they have in Washington right now. I mean, we've talked about the tax bill a little bit, where they gave $1.5 trillion to big corporations, to banks, to millionaires and billionaires who don't need it, while they continue to fail to fund our public education system. Title I has never been fully funded. We do not provide that funding for special needs students. We do not get enough resources to students who need it. That's what the federal government's role is, to set your priorities correctly and to make sure that schools have an opportunity with better training for teachers, smaller class sizes, the technological tools they need to learn. We need to get those investments and resources to the schools and then get out of the way and let the school districts teach the kids in the best possible way using those tools and well-trained teachers. That's what we need to have. Congressman Knight literally wants to abolish the Department of Education and the State Department of Education and massively cut that funding. That is only going to hold our kids back and prevent people from having an opportunity to get ahead.
Just really quick, so your answer is basically, if I understand things correctly, just more money put into education is from the government?
We vastly underfund our public education system, and we need to change that. We need to say this is a priority, this is our future, and we are going to give every single kid in every single community an opportunity to succeed. And we are not doing that right now, and that is a moral failure of this country.
Katie,
Yeah.
what do you see the role of federal government in education, and what would you do?
Show me the money, man. This is what it's about. It is about ensuring that we are fully funding our federal mandates, including ensuring that we have a floor for all kids, that that anyone in our country, and I know we're blessed with great schools here. I went to them. I know how great they are. But not every community is like that. In the Antelope Valley, every single school is a Title I school, and that is in certain districts it's a Title I school. That to me is completely unacceptable when we don't have the resources from the federal government. Special needs, those resources, what local school districts have to do to ensure that kids with special needs are getting the kind of education they deserve is draining the resources that they could be spending in other areas when our federal government has said that we're supposed to be providing a base level of that. So we're not. And fundamentally, I think that we should look at the Federal Department of Education and see what we can learn from each other. I mean, best practices should be shared through that. But the bottom line is about ensuring that we have the resources, that every single kid gets the highest quality education that's going to prepare them for the jobs of the future.
Jess?
So my mom was a teacher before she joined the FBI in public schools in St. Louis and St. Petersburg. And one of the reasons she joined the FBI is because she said she was tired of taking knives away from kids, so she wanted to go into a profession where she could carry a weapon. That's not a thing any teacher should ever be worried about, but that's where we are right now. Teachers are being pushed to be armed in classrooms. Steve Knight supports this stuff. And he voted for the STEP Act, which basically throws unspecified funding at schools for barrier technology and things like that, which is basically just an excuse towards privatizing more things around schools. It's another cash grab. And, that's really dangerous. I've had the benefit of public and private schools in my life. I went to public school and then Catholic school and then private college and then public grad school. And I've actually taught in public classrooms at the elementary school level and at the university level. And I'll tell you right now, our education system is vast and it is diverse, and we don't just need more funding. We also need things that have been shown to work scientifically. Like middle school is one of the times when girls fall out of love with science and math. And also, when you see students of all genders and all backgrounds really struggle because they're taken away from the environment that they know in the elementary school level, they're separated, and then you throw them back in high school. We need people who are going to analyze education policy as well as education's role, federal government's role in education, to actually find a way that works for all students.
I'm not going to give you a follow-up because you kind of answered my next. I'm not going to give you a follow-up on that because that was kind of my next question. So I'll just throw it to Bryan and Katie. It's interesting that you talked about the idea of the federal government being more involved, I guess, in the curriculum. Is that correct? Am I understanding you correctly?
Having national standards is not a bad thing, as long as we work to make good ones.
Because growing up in Kentucky, I was taught the Civil War was not about slavery. So
You're not the only one.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, to Bryan and then to Katie, I'll give you each 30 seconds on that. Should the federal government be involved in the national curriculum, in a curriculum for the nationally? I mean,
can I answer after they do? Because I want
Sure.
to add something. Okay.
Sure.
Look, there are absolutely national baselines that the federal government can play a role and conduct that investigation just the way Jess talked about. The Department of Education does things, and they can do really amazing things if we give it the opportunity to do so. But what you can't have is too heavy-handed approach to really dictate for specific local school districts to do things that they simply aren't able to do. And so you need to have those baselines in place, and you need to put the investment in resources in place, and that can give every kid an opportunity to succeed.
Katie, your
Yeah.
turn.
Like I said earlier, we need to set a floor, and I don't believe that anywhere in our country we should be teaching that evolution doesn't exist. That's not how, that fundamentally there are basics about of what it's going to take for the next generation to be prepared for this world's economy and the jobs that are going to be available for it. So I think that is the role of the federal government. That said, each district is going to know the specific kinds of curriculum that that the kids deserve to have here.
All right, Jess, you want to do one follow-up? I'll give you 30 seconds.
I really have to take a couple swings at Betsy DeVos because I'm an educator, right? And I know there are probably a lot of educators out here in the audience. And just the fact that since last fall, she's rolled back protections for sexual assault victims on campuses. She has rolled back protections for students with disabilities. She has rolled back protections for transgender students. And just recently, she said she's going to stop investigating civil rights violations in schools. We have to take care of these things. That's what the federal government's role is in education.
All right. Okay. I have a question that was sent in to me. I had several questions. I'd like to thank everybody that did submit questions. And I love this question. And we'll start it off. We'll go with Katie first. This person said, I've heard it said many times that all politics are local. What issues affecting the 25th District are you planning to take to Congress for legislative action? Or what proposed legislation do you intend to support on our behalf?
One of the number one issues that we hear, we're knocking on doors every single day, so we're talking to voters about what their issues are. And while I do believe that all politics is local, even more than that, it's how does it affect your life? And what we're hearing over and over and over again is that I can't afford my health insurance premiums. I can't afford the deductible. I'm opting out of health insurance because it's too expensive. That, to me, has to be one of our absolute top priorities, especially when you have someone like Steve Knight who has voted to take away health care from so many people right here in our district. So beyond that, though, we've also got an affordable housing crisis. We know that my generation isn't even planning on buying, the vast majority of us aren't even planning on buying homes because we can't afford it. The thought of getting a down payment on a house is completely impossible. So over and over again, we hear that we need to have more affordable housing. We need to make it possible for our generation to buy homes and reduce the pressure on the rental market so that we don't have homelessness. Those are areas, both of those two areas are ones where I have actual experience on the ground helping to develop and implement policy, including implementing the Medicaid expansion here in California for literally tens of thousands of people, including my entire career being dedicated to dealing with the affordable housing crisis that is becoming more and more of an issue for every single person in this community.
Jess?
So one thing that really sets me apart in this race is that I actually have a vision for our community, and it's a multifaceted vision. I want us to be a global hub for green technology research and development. And because I'm a scientist and I understand how the federal grant-making process works, hooray, I want to go to DC and be an advocate to bring federal investment, to bring real dollars back into our community, to give us the jobs of the 21st century so that we can deal with the challenges of climate change by being on the cutting edge, so that we can deal with the rise in automation by having jobs that are here locally that you can't outsource. We need to do that by having a CSU here in our community. We need to do that by making our space a place where people, when they grow up, they say, I want to raise my family there. I want to stay here when they are from here. We want to be a destination, and that means supporting arts and culture and innovation, people who make and build things, and that is what I want to prioritize, is bringing federal funding back to our community so that we can be a leader, so that people can say, yeah, you know what, I'm from the 25th District, and it's awesome. And when you put people to work in our community, when we stop being a commuter community and we start being a place where people can go to work really locally, that's when we have the community that we want. We can do that.
30 second follow-up. Jess, one thing okay, that's great. But you're counting on a blue wave in a certain sense. what happens if it's a Republican-filled Congress and you're there trying to get funding here?
I'm a scientist. I can go in and do something that no other candidate in the race can do, which is replace Knight on the House Science Committee. That gives you a lot of power immediately that normally freshman representatives can't have. So I will have the ability to influence decisions and funding for other representatives. So that's how you do it. It's basically saying, you help my district and I can help with initiatives that are going to help science and technology in your community as well. And I think that's something that we really need to have in our minds when we make our votes.
Bryan, what do you want to do? What's the legislation specifically for the 25th District?
Yeah. So first, as Katie said, all politics is local, but these national issues really affect a lot of us locally. And so when Congressman Knight voted for Trump Care, 57,000 people in this community will lose their health care. That's a local issue, and we need Medicare for all for everyone. With the failure right now to address DACA, 5,000 people in this community and their families are at risk and go to bed every night wondering if this president is going to tear that family apart. That affects us locally. So we need to address some of these really big national issues, including the chaos and dysfunction of President Trump's administration, because it affects all of us here. But we have a lot of very specific local issues. I mean, environmentally, we talked about the Porter Ranch gas leak. I've already drafted a piece of legislation. It's going to be the first bill that I introduce when I'm in Congress about that. But we've got the Santa Susana field site. We've got Cemex. We've got Whitaker Burmite. I mean, we've got the Chiquita Canyon landfill. There are a lot of local environmental issues that our science-denying congressman doesn't give a hoot about, and we need to make sure that we get someone in there fighting to protect those areas and this environment. And then, this is a commuting district for a whole lot of people. A lot of people in the Antelope Valley and Simi right here spend an hour and a half, 2 hours each day, every day driving to work. We need to change that. I want to sit on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Both parties talk about $1 trillion, $2 trillion infrastructure bill. I want to have a seat at that table and make sure we're getting investments here to improve our local lives with our infrastructure.
All right. We're going to go to Jess on this one. What do you consider to be the most important aspect of being a member of Congress? And please describe your understanding of the job as a whole. And follow up to do.
This is a very complicated question.
You think so?
Should I take notes on the whole thing? No,
yes,
go ahead.
Please.
Yeah.
Pop quiz. Let's start with that. Just, what do you see?
Start with that? Okay.
Yeah, start with that.
All right. I'm like,
I didn't write this question.
Okay. So as a member of Congress, your fundamental job is to pass legislation that is going to make life better for people all around the country, and of course, in your home district. As a member of Congress, you're expected to write legislation. I'm going to put write in air quotes because a lot of times your staff members are the people who are actually writing the legislation. That to me is kind of a removal of some of the duties of Congress that I think are fundamental. I think that members of Congress need to be well-versed enough in a broad array of topics to talk about them and to listen and understand when people in their communities come to them and say, hey, I have a problem with thing X, Y, or Z. But Congress needs to actually listen to the advice of experts. And I think that is a key role as well that Congress has to play, is kind of an intermediary between experts in a wide variety of fields and the general public. So we have to filter that and say, how can I use this information to make a good law? Here's a nerd moment for you, even nerdier than being a scientist. I did student congress when I was in high school, which is where you compete in writing legislation and you try to get it passed in front of a student congress. And so you actually say, be it resolved, you write the whole resolution out, and it's totally dorky, but I hope some of your kids do it because it's really fun and you learn a lot. Legislation is not fun, it is not sexy, it is not exciting, but it is really rewarding. And to me, listening to the community and being able to take that knowledge that I get into the legislature and actually craft laws, that's the best part about it.
Time. I'm going to do a quick follow-up before we get to Bryan and Katie.
Okay. Because
something that intrigues me about you is the first time we talked on a podcast, I think it's episode 68 or something, guys. You talked about, because I asked you about the role of being in Congress and what happens if your constituents don't agree with how you're going to vote. Because isn't that one of the biggest complaints that a lot of the people out here have about Steve Knight? What happens if everybody here doesn't believe in climate change and you know otherwise?
Okay, so again, this is why I'm running an evidence-based campaign. And that's why people in Congress should be basing their policy decisions on evidence and facts. Because you're never going to agree 100% of the time with a member of Congress, with any elected official, unless you are that person. So you need to know that you're sending people to office who you can count on to do the right thing based on fact and evidence. And they'll explain why they voted the way they did. I will always look you in the eye and shake your hand and say, that's why I made my decision. I will be accountable.
Time. Katie, what do you see as your role in Congress, and can you be specific about it?
Yeah. So, of course, a member of Congress needs to write and pass legislation. I mean, that's the most obvious aspect of it, right? But I think beyond that, whoever you're electing to be a leader. And we have not nearly enough leadership in Congress. And that's why I would bring my experience from being the leader of a $50 million a year organization with 400 staff, and more importantly, being a leader on an issue that matters so much to our communities, to bring that experience to the table. When you're a leader, what that means is that you have to listen. You have to be effective. You have to make sure that you're being a voice for the people that you are leading more than anything else. And fundamentally, I believe that if we had true leadership in Congress, we wouldn't be bickering back and forth. We wouldn't be stuck in this place where so many people in our country don't believe in government anymore. So the number one thing that I would do is I would go in and be a leader and make things happen. And the way that you do that also is through relationships. That's why it's so important that every single member of Congress who is endorsed in this race has endorsed me. The local elected officials that represent this district, including Senator Henry Stern, have endorsed me. And so many of our local electeds here, including Christy Smith and several other local board members, school board members. So you have to be able to work across every single aspect of government to make things happen. And the only way that you can do that is with the experience of collaboration and the ability to get things done.
Can I have a point of clarification? Congressman Jerry McNerney has endorsed my campaign, and that just to point out that fact. So,
congratulations, I hadn't heard that yet.
Katie, what about you? If you're in a situation where you disagree with your constituents, how are you going to vote? Will you vote where your constituents believe, or are you going to vote the way you believe?
No, you have to vote. You have to vote for your constituents. That's fundamentally what you're supposed to do as an elected. I have my values, and I won't bend on those. But in order to make an effective decision and to vote in the direction that this community needs, you have to listen to the people here.
Would you cross party lines if it meant doing that?
If it meant doing the right thing for this district, absolutely.
Okay. Bryan, what is the role of a congressman, congressperson?
The role of a representative in office is to get the best possible outcomes and solutions for our community. And frankly, right now, that is not happening, and it is not possible with everything that so many of us in this room hold dear under attack by this president. He is causing so much dysfunction, disruption, and chaos, and it's not an accident. He goes out there and attacks the LGBTQ community and immigrants and women because he's trying to distract us while he creates an agency at Health and Human Services to allow doctors to refuse treatment to trans people. That's wrong. He's trying to make sure that we aren't paying attention while he breaks families apart at courthouses or in hospitals. We have to make sure that we hold this president accountable, that we get in there, serve subpoenas, put witnesses under oath, get to the truth, get rid of this corruption and cronyism, and then we can start actually passing policies that are going to help people in this community. That's what we need to do, and we can't do that as long as this president is causing so much chaos. And once we then get control of these the committees in Congress, we start putting this legislation through to get us health care, to solve immigration, to finally address the Cemex mine, we will start improving the lives of people in this community.
Now, I want to put the same question to you that I put to Jess and Katie. Would you vote against your beliefs or your knowledge if your constituents wanted otherwise?
Look, you absolutely have to be true to your values at all times. And that's why I try to be an open book on where I stand, what my guiding principles are, coming from my grandpa who was a preacher, whose number one issue was the golden rule. That's what I try to follow. We can't talk about every possible vote in advance. There are too many of them. But you can know what I'm going to use as my guiding principle when I go in there to cast that vote. And you can trust that I'm going to look at it from all sides and do what's best for our community and our values.
Would you cross party lines if necessary?
Absolutely, of course. There's a whole lot of bipartisan legislation that we need and should get if we had people in office who weren't beholden to, corporations and millionaires and billionaires and
what?
only looking out for their donors.
Can you name one that specifically you said bipartisan legislation that you support?
Well, what I'm saying is we should have bipartisan solution. 80-90% of Americans want common sense gun solutions to save lives. People want solutions to DACA to protect dreamers right now. People want infrastructure spending to improve our communities. That crosses party lines. It's just the McCain-Feingold. It is just the extremist in Congress like Steve Knight who won't vote for it to actually put our community first.
Okay. We're starting to wrap up, guys. You've all pledged to support the eventual Democratic candidate. Obviously, you think you are the best candidate for the job. I'm assuming that for all three of you. But if you don't get the nomination, what qualities do the other candidates have that make them a better representative than Steve Knight? Let's start with Jess.
Okay, that's an easy one because Steve Knight is absolutely spineless in the way that he has voted. And just by their very presence standing upright on this stage, both of my opponents here have great spines. It's true. I believe that either of them also would be able to be a bit more accountable than good old friend Steve has been. And I think that it is really important that when you're considering who to vote for, that you know that despite what people may say, no one's getting primaried in the sense that a Democrat won't get through. It's only Knight versus us. So one of us is going to be your representative because we are not going to let Steve keep his job. So.
Bryan and Katie, there's been a little contentious banter between the two of you guys. Katie, what can you say nice about the other two candidates?
Yeah, no, I think these are incredibly commendable, respectable people that are both brilliant and way smarter than our current representative is. So I will say that off the top of my head. But second of all, I think that all of us here, because we are Democrats, because we are on this side of the issues, fundamentally, I think our values and the things that we think are important to Americans are much more in line with what I believe this district believes are important to Americans. Jess has a great deal of expertise in science and climate change that I believe at some point, I believe right now we need more scientists in Congress. I won't disagree with that at all. I just believe that I have a better track record and experience to be the representative for this district. And in terms of Bryan's strengths and capacities, he will be able to go in and write legislation faster than anyone else because he's a lawyer. He knows how this works. I won't dismiss that at all. So I think I would be proud to support either of you if I don't win the nomination.
Bryan, your turn.
Yeah, look, it didn't take Donald Trump to be president for me to want to get Steve Knight out of office. He is so bad for this community in so many different ways. And we agree on a whole lot of issues here. There might be differences around the edges on certain policies, but we all believe in those fundamental things that we have to fight for as Democrats of putting people first. And that's just not what Congressman Knight has done. He has shown it on health care, on immigration, on the environment, on every single issue. He's on the wrong side of it. And I know that both people on this stage, on my sides, would absolutely be there with us way more than Congressman Knight. And there is no reason that when we get to 2019, he should be representing this community.
Well, the interesting thing was I was on all three of your websites last night. Believe it or not, guys, sometimes I do research. And, there's a lot of the same stuff and the issues. But the one thing I saw constantly was, or consistently was, we need to put more money into this. We need to put more money into this. So my question is very simple. I see a lot of spend on there, and I'm trying to play the role of a conservative. Where's the money going to come from? How are you going to put the money into education, into Veterans Administration? Where's that going to come from? Let's start with Katie.
Yeah. Well, somebody who's been in charge of a large budget, when you are looking at the revenues that are going out compared to the revenues that are coming in as compared to the expenses that are going out, you can cut the budget as much as you want, but the reality is that you have to look at it as a revenue problem. And in our case, we have the wealthiest Americans and huge corporations that are virtually paying nothing in taxes, especially this is so much worse because of the tax plan. So in order to pay for this, we can't pretend like we're not going to need more revenue. I think that would be completely short-sighted, but it shouldn't come on the backs of working and middle-class families. It should come on those who have been ducking their fair share for far too long.
Bryan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about shifting priorities. I mean, when they passed this tax bill in December, they found $1.5 trillion. And they just decided to give it to banks and corporations and billionaires instead of investing in these programs that would actually improve our communities. When we talk about Medicare for All, over a 10-year period, the proposed Medicare for All plan would save $17 trillion in health care costs. That's what we're talking about. We can actually save so much money if we invest wisely, if we actually look out for efficient programs that work better. And so it's about having people in office who recognize we need to shift priorities, put people first, and really, really get our campaign finance system under control so these outside influences can't keep buying elected officials who corrupt our system and don't put people first.
Jess.
So when you want to talk inefficiency, let's talk the military-industrial complex. That is a real problem. We see expenditures on things that are incredibly wasteful, and they don't actually make our military more effective. So why don't we go a little bit back to the future? In 1958, Congress passed the National Defense Education Act. It was designed to basically counter Sputnik and get the United States on a path where we could be compatible with growing technology and different sort of learnings and skill sets that we would need to see our kids having. So why don't we do something similar to the NDEA when we want to fund education? Let's get money from defense and take it to educate kids in cybersecurity and 21st century technologies. That's how we make things different. And that is actually what we do. We look at existing deficits and we look at where we have a lot of money going, we examine it for inefficiencies, and then we cut the costs, we move the money over. And there is always enough money for warplanes and weapons of war. We never have enough money for teachers to have pencils and books in their classrooms. That has to change. And again, it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And that's what I want to bring to Congress.
All right, guys, we're going to start to wrap up. I would like to say to everybody here, if I've done my job right, I've pissed somebody off tonight. So if you're going to unfriend me on Facebook tomorrow, please send me an email, just make me aware. But let's have a little fun. First of all, what issue or question have you not been asked that you want to talk about? Let's go back around with Jess first.
You like to start with me first.
Well, you're closest.
Okay, let's see. What's really fun? I don't know. What do you guys want me to talk about? Give me an issue.
Climate change!
So wait, I heard civil rights, right? Okay. Animal rights. Oh gosh, animal rights. Okay, yeah. I've been rescuing animals since I was 4 years old. And making sure that we actually update our laws for humane agricultural practices is a really big priority of mine because it also impacts climate change. Yep, these massive factory farms have a huge impact on the changing climate because of the release of methane, which is one of the most active greenhouse gases. Science nerd moment. We need to make sure, too, that when we do pass legislation for animal rights, that we know what the implications are. So I rescue ex-racehorses. They're about to go to slaughter. There is no horse slaughter currently in the U.S., and people think, oh, that's good. Guess what? That means that the horses get shipped across the border to Mexico or to Canada. They're shoved in small trucks where it's really traumatic for them. So that legislation, there is no perfect solution. So what can we do? We can actually require the people who breed all these extra horses, because trust me, only one ever wins the Kentucky Derby every year. So, we've got a bunch of horses that are a little too slow and no one wants them. So we have to introduce legislation that makes people accountable for the things they're trying to profit off of, particularly when those things are animals that actually feel pain.
Bryan, what issue or question have you not been asked?
I'll tell you, Stephen, you did a really good job today asking a broad selection of questions on a lot of issues. I don't know, is there a question somebody has? A lot of things being yelled out right there. Absolutely, healthcare is a right. I heard someone ask that question. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to Syria, I'm really, really concerned. We talked about how dangerous Donald Trump is earlier. I'm concerned with the approach that he had, the way he launched a strike, without getting the evidence first. There are a lot of questions about what happened there, and we need to be cooperating more with our allies, getting the information on the ground, and making sure we don't allow this president to realize that he might get a pole bump every time he launches missiles and have that lead us into war to try and screw an election up. We can't let that happen. We need to be vigilant, and we need to make sure that we protect our country and our national security, and don't let this person and the really scary folks surrounding him make this country and world more dangerous.
Katie?
Well, someone shouted out equal pay earlier, and that's something that I want to talk about, not just in the sense of equal pay, but representation for women. Less than 20% of the seats in Congress right now are held by women, and I can guarantee you that if we had parity, if we had 50% of the seats in Congress held by women, we would get a lot more done. So I truly believe that the issues that matter most to all of us we can't make progress on those until we have equal representation. And we are failing as a country when we aren't electing more women. This is the year of Me Too. This is the year of the Women's March. And it's time for real change in Congress.
All right, so here we're going to do a 30-second question. So my suggestion to you, to each of you, is try and answer it with 2 words. So
30 seconds. It's a long 2 words.
Well,
Supercalifragilistic.
if the question's right, you're going to have to think about it for a second. If you became the target of Trump's name-calling, what childish nickname would he give you? Katie, you're first.
I'm pretty sure he'd call me Blondie or something like that, because there's no way that he could not attack a woman on her appearance.
Okay. Bryan.
I think he'd probably call me Badgering Bryan, because he'd get sick of all the questions I asked him when I had him under oath.
Jess, you're last this time.
Yeah, cool. He'd probably say one of the things that the people who used to bully me when I was a kid would say, which is fire crotch. And I mean, you really think Trump could actually pass up an opportunity to sexually harass a sitting member of Congress? No.
Before we go to closing remarks, I do want to ask one quick question. We'll give you 1 minute each. It's a bit of a challenge. We'll start with Bryan. What makes America great?
What makes America great?
Yes.
Is that supposed to be funny? No. What makes America great are the ideals that we're founded on, that we do believe all people are equal, that we believe every person is supposed to have an opportunity to get ahead and have a better life than their parents and their parents' parents. That's amazing, and not every country even pretends to believe that. But unfortunately right now, because of the dysfunction, because of this president, because of how extreme the other side has gotten, too many people aren't getting those opportunities, and we have really strayed away from those ideals. And so we have so much potential. We have so much opportunity to still be that shining beacon on a hill And it is really incumbent on us to elect people, to get them in office who believe in that vision of America and who are going to fight to bring it into a reality so that every kid of today can have a better tomorrow.
Jess, what makes America great?
I've worked on 6 continents, and I've lived in 3 different countries. And I can answer that for you in one word, but then of course I'm going to expand. But the one word is diversity. We have such an incredible wealth of diversity from all different angles. We've got diversity of country of origin, diversity of language, diversity of religion or lack thereof. We have diversity of thought, of philosophy, of heritage. I mean, it is incredible what we have here in America. And I will tell you that racism and inequality exist all over the world. The United States has a painful history with racism, but we have actually taken steps to try to make it better. And we have people who call us out and hold us accountable when we're not doing good enough. And we don't silence those voices. We lift them up. And that is what we as Democrats do that makes us great, is that we are the party of we. We welcome everyone, and that's how it should be, because that is the backbone of America.
All right, guys. This is our. They're summing up the debate now.
Yeah, I didn't get to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Gosh darn it.
I think America's
so
great
proud of
too.
Stephen's
what makes
trying to
him-
cheat.
What makes America great, Katie? I apologize.
That's okay. What makes America great is the fact that we are all standing here. And this is truly a country where someone can be born to complete poverty and end up the president. That's possible. For my family, it was something that, both of my grandparents were born in complete poverty. One of them at one point in his life lived in a chicken shed. The other one lived in a shack. I went and saw it. And but ultimately one of them ended up becoming a rocket scientist, literally. And the other one ended up getting a full scholarship to Princeton and being a UCLA political science professor, who's the reason that I care about politics in the first place. So, and then me, being the daughter of a police officer and a nurse. Bryan, being the daughter of two public, or you're not a daughter, sorry.
We won't discriminate. It's cool.
Of 2 public school teachers, and Jess being the daughter of FBI agents. You're not inheriting political opportunity here. We are a country that can get anybody in as a representative who can actually represent us.
All right. Let's go to our closing remarks. I did get everybody right? Okay. Sure. Katie, why don't you start? You have 2 minutes.
Sure. Look, we're all here because we care about this community. Every single one of us here. I won't deny that for a second. But ultimately, we have a few things that we've got to look at in the next year or 2 or 10 or more. And that's who can actually make change happen, who can truly represent this community, and more importantly right now, who can defeat Steve Knight. So fundamentally, I believe that we share so many values in common. We can't argue with that. But I know that I have the best chance at defeating Steve Knight. Polling shows me beating him by 13 points in a head-to-head. And I know that I can best represent this community because this is the community I love. This is where all my friends, family members, all still live. And that I have the experience of actually being able to address one of the biggest crises facing our country, homelessness and affordable housing, by developing legislation, passing legislation, and implementing that legislation by working with other people to finally make a difference in people's lives. That's what we need. We need people who are going to go in there and be able to make a difference right now and who are going to fundamentally represent our community. And I would be so honored if you gave me that opportunity. Thank you.
We'll go to Jess. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so thank you all for being here tonight, and thanks to Stephen for taking this on, because it's not an easy thing to be a moderator for a congressional candidate debate. I mean, you get slings and arrows from all directions, and we're Democrats, we're never happy, right? So he's done a lot to make this happen. But of course, that actually speaks to the larger community. Everybody here in this building is invested in what happens this year, 2018. And I will tell you right now that 2018, this election, it's not about money. It's not about polls. And it's not just about Donald Trump. It's about creating a vision for the future that is going to make everything better for our families and our neighbors. That's what it's about. And, that is why we have to be the party of we. We have to make sure that we are reaching out and engaging people who have been shut out of the process. Yes, all of us on this stage right now are white, but that's not going to be the case for our representative from this district forever. We have a changing demographic here in Southern California, and we have to make sure that we are mentoring and including people in the conversation and not excluding. That is, I think, what this is all about, is saying, you know what? We are working for the future. We are just borrowing time in the seat in Congress, and we are saving it for the people who come after us and who will also do great things. We need to be working for and with people in the community to have that vision that I was talking about earlier. We need to make sure that we have somebody in office who can actually accomplish something. A freshman representative generally has very limited power, despite all the bluster we like to throw around. But, I can go in on the science committee and start making a difference day one in things that will not just impact our community, but our whole country and the future of our whole country. So let's work together to make the vision that we want for our community a reality. That's the power of we.
Bryan?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for doing this. Thank you to everyone for being here. It is a really, really exciting time right now. It's scary because of what's happening in Washington and because of all the dysfunction, but seeing the energy, seeing how many people are coming out to the first march of their lives, the first protest of their lives, who are knocking on neighbors' doors and finding out how many Democrats actually live on their street that they didn't know before. It's really, really wonderful, and it gives us such amazing potential to harness this energy and spend the next 6 months making sure that we get people to come out to the polls so that we can elect someone who will be a representative. But that's not what the goal of all this is. The goal is to make sure we use that energy to get someone in office who will be able to start making that positive change to shift our country in a different direction it's going right now. Because it is broken in Washington. We are leaving too many people behind, and kids are not getting an opportunity to get ahead. And we all talked about things that make America great, but there is a lot happening in Washington right now because of people like Steve Knight who are preventing us from living up to those ideals. But if we take advantage of all this energy, of all the newfound excitement, we have a great chance. I spend a lot of time with Lisa going to parts of this district that generally aren't visited, whether it's Lake Los Angeles or Green Valley, and people are paying attention. People are knocking doors in this community that no politician has ever visited before. And it's really important that we just keep doing what we're doing and spreading that word about getting health care and immigration reform and protecting our environment and holding this president accountable. And if we get that message out, we can really start to take our country back and protect our republic for generations to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the debate. We'd like to say thank you to all the candidates. First off, Jess Phoenix. Bryan Caforio. Katie Hill. And if I may just briefly like to say thank you to Chad Campbell, Philip Germain, Hillary Chardine, ladies and gentlemen, who did the timing. I forgot to introduce her. I apologize. Our stage manager, John Fortman, if he'll come out and wave for just a second. Tom Lund in the back, and Brett Haddock, who did all the technical work for this. And to all of you, I want to thank you all for being interested in the politics of this district, for listening to the podcast, hopefully. And, well, quite frankly, I hope you guys enjoy the talk.
You've been listening to the Talk of Santa Clarita. A new podcast is available for download every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @thetalkofsc and on Facebook at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website at thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita. On the air, and very much aware.
Any questions?